Hi everyone and welcome to this episode of Workplace Stories, the People Experience Hub podcast. And today I'm talking to the always wonderful Amanda Arrowsmith. Recently the CIPD Chief People Officer, but with a rich background spanning many years in HR. She's going to be talking about that transformation starts with people, leadership, line managers, and the human side of digital change. In this podcast, you're going to be learning about how she approaches change, how she approaches digital change, and the power that line managers bring, and how HR can step in and enable an organisation. This is one that you're going to enjoy. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me on Workplace Stories, the People Experience Hub podcast.
Good morning. It's so lovely to be here with you.
And it's like, I was thinking back the other day and I was thinking back fondly to when I first met you, which I think was in the good Twitter days, and then into various stuff. But I'm going to just jump into a few bits, which is, Amanda, you've had such a rich and varied career in HR, and from consulting to HR director roles, recently Chief People Officer at the CIPD. I wonder if you could just, what are the pivotal moments in your career?
So I think I was incredibly fortunate. So when I started in HR back in 1997, I worked for an amazing head of HR. So I worked for a lady called Melanie Galling, and she just, sometimes you work for someone who just inspires you and just drives you and also just pushes you that little
Yeah.
bit. So I was incredibly fortunate that my first job in HR as a personnel assistant, that's how long and storied my career is, was working just for a brilliant head of personnel, as she was back then at Evershed Solicitors. And it just set me with this understanding that we are a business function, but it's there as a service. And so it's a function as service. So how do we help the organization to really deliver? And then through my career, I've had as you say, I've done interim work on and off for kind of 24 years now. So I've had the opportunity to work in lots of different industries and lots of different sectors. But I've also worked with some brilliant leaders, but also some not so brilliant leaders. But I worked for a pharmaceutical company in the early 2010s, and I worked for a CFO who taught me how business works. So I understood market capital, I understood about shareholders, I understood how the finances worked. And he really drove home to me that you can get all the people stuff and you can bring all that skill, but if you don't understand how the business functions, you're not going to work at that CPO level. You're going to work as an HR business partner, which is brilliant, and we need that. But actually, if you want to work at that CPO level, you want to work at that senior level, you need to understand how a business runs, and you need to be a business leader who puts people at the heart and the center. And so that was probably the most pivotal thing for me. And then just working different sectors, the difference between working for a FTSE 40 company, and then I immediately went to a biomedical research facility, which was in education and charity, and the difference in pace, in culture, in the way decisions were made, hierarchy, all that really interesting stuff. So those are some of the pivotal moments, I think.
I love that, and I kind of it resonates with me as well because I mean I grew up in Tesco and I actually grew up driving a forklift truck, and then moving in to do stuff. But I always knew that the HR people, the personnel managers, the HR leaders, whatever they were called over the iterations, the ones who had that operational experience, the one who had been a warehouse shift manager, a store manager, had worked in an operational core function, and then had either done some HR, gone into that, or been in that role and moved into HR, their knowledge of the business was so good. And I think it was about empathy for the people as well as empathy for the processes and empathy for the stakeholder.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. For me, I think you can do it the other way around. You don't have to go ops then HR, but I think if you're working in HR and you don't understand what your business does, what people actually do on a
Mm.
day-to-day basis, how they operate, how the sausage is made, if you don't understand that bit, you just understand what might be considered as the HR specialism stuff, then you're not adding value to that business. You're not really understanding how it works. And therefore, you're not going to truly partner with the business. If you think about the Ulrich model and where the partnership stuff came from, that's about understanding your business. That's about bringing that people stuff into how a business operates. So I think you know, if you come from operations into HR, amazing. Look, I've just left the CIPD. Of course, I'm going to say, do your professional qualifications. It's a profession. We should be proud of the fact that it's a profession.
Yeah, yeah.
Qualifications. But you can also do it the other way around. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, I can't understand the business because I haven't worked in that. Go and spend some time on the phones. Go and be on the shop floor. I was fortunate. I worked for a manufacturing company, and we had a power cut that meant that all the computers went down. So all of us that were in the office, we couldn't do anything. But some of the things that we did on the production line was actually hand building some parts and some components. So I took my HR team and we went and learned how to do that on the production line. So we actually went and continued. We didn't just sit around going, oh, the computers aren't working, we can't do anything. We went and did some stuff. And that builds you social capital with your people you work with, because they're like, oh, they're one of us, they know what we do. But also then you understand, and the things you hear by standing on a production line, the things you hear in those spaces, that's when you really get that employee voice stuff, that magic, that real gold around what's happening in your organization. Sorry, slight tangent there.
No, I think it's brilliant, and it leans into, from empathy comes advocacy, and familiarity drives people to understand and to trust. And it's even things that advocacy stuff like, and I think the manufacturing company you're talking about, if I think about my boiler upstairs, when I had to choose a mag clean for the boiler,
Oh yeah.
the one that I chose from the three that were given to me was the one for the company that you worked for.
Well, of course, because they were brilliant.
Because I want to but I want to advocate for you as well. I want to advocate for that company. So I think what did your time at the CIB teach you about the evolving role of HR in today's organisation? Because so much change has happened in the last sort of 5 and 6 years.
Completely. So I joined CIPD in 2022. So post COVID, but slap bang in the middle of what does it mean to work in this new world with this massive change that's happened for a lot of people, even those who didn't work remotely. So even those who went to work every day, so working in hospitality or in the NHS or on a factory production line, even for all those people, COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of us. And for HR, what happened was, for a lot of people, we became much more reactive rather than proactive, but we were still expected to do all the proactive stuff. So what I've particularly seen in the last 3 years, the role has grown and it has expanded, but that kind of frontline caring welfare piece has become much more prevalent, and that well-being and that supporting of the well-being of employees has become much more prevalent. There's a risk that it's seen as soft skills. There's a risk that it's seen as, oh, well, HR deals with that, but it isn't. HR deals with the fallout of it not being done well. Good human resources teams are able to get in early, get the support of they need good CEOs providing that support, leading that forward. But as well as the legislative framework, as well as all the good work around how we recruit, how we take things forward, all the EDI work, all the work around people looking at 4-day weeks, the changes in the flexible working, all of that good stuff, there's also this community of people who came out of life-changing crisis for everyone. Even people who weren't that touched by COVID will know other people who were very ill, perhaps lost their jobs, perhaps had to move house, move back with parents, who lost friends and family. And that collective massive trauma, the people who deal with people at work are at the heart of trying to make that work, whilst dealing with a government that went through some serious difficulties with a number of different prime ministers and the change that that brought. That crash in 22 and the impact that that had on business and the bottom line, the geopolitical stuff that's happening globally, the rise of the right wing, the rise of social media and that kind of the acceptance of what it's okay to say and the way that we talk to people and the way we treat people. If you look at some of the stats around violence in hospitality or violence in the healthcare, you're seeing that rise. And the people function, the HR function is at the heart of that. While still making sure you get paid, making sure we're getting sick notes in, helping my managers with recruitment, dealing with people falling out and all that day-to-day stuff. So I think the role is evolving in that there's a lot more juggling. But there's also, but then you've got, I don't know, let's say 50% of people are still working hybrid and working at home. You've got a lot of HR people who aren't seeing things until they're a problem. And so the well-being of the profession itself is really important. And
Hmm.
what I've seen is the CIPD really listen to that and think about that and see how they can help that. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening, but I'm still doing some of the same stuff I was doing back in '97. I'm still
Yeah,
HR is
of
HR.
course.
Employment law is employment law. You're still
People are
doing
people.
stuff. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
You know, and it's one of the things I always love is I bring out the ILO statement, which is ultimately when we have people who produce at work, that person is a human first before they are a producer.
Yeah,
And I always love putting that up and saying to people, so no one can disagree with this, can we? So this was from the ILO statement produced in Geneva in 1957.
yeah.
So the concept of a human-centric workforce isn't new, but evolving around the edges of it, evolving around the what does it mean for that individual. So what
Yeah, and if
advice
you
would
look
you
back at what
give?
happened, sorry, if you look back at what happened kind of
Yeah,
in the early 20th century, so and you look at that kind of workers' reform stuff and the work that Joseph Rowntree and those people, that the workers' welfare stuff, that came from these are people that we care about, and we're only going to get our productivity if we treat people as humans.
yeah, hugely. I mean, and it's this could, I feel like this could be a podcast on its own. But think about HR professionals who are jumping on this podcast and maybe they only get to this point,
Yeah,
right? Because they've gone for a short walk. They've listened to this
okay.
point.
Yeah.
What's the advice that you would give to a HR professional who wants to? We're going to talk about transformation in it. So they want to lead transformation in their organization, but they're not sure where to start. We're going to talk some more in a minute. So maybe
Yeah.
the other thing is carry on listening. But if they only get here, what's the advice?
Know your why. So know your why. Transformation is we're going to talk about transformation. We're going to talk about how and the hows of that. But the most important thing for any HR professional who wants to lead transformation, wants to affect transformation, is know your why. If you're just doing it because somebody wants to change a color or someone's got a thing about it, that's not a good why. If you don't know your why, how do you expect your people to know your why? So that would be my one. If there's one thing that you take away from this conversation, there's one thing you take going forward, really take your time to understand your why in any change or transformation. Why are you doing it? What do you want the outcome to be? Why is this change necessary and why now? That would be the one
Okay, love that. I love that. Right, let's get into the meat of it.
thing.
So transformation and the human element. You've said that digital transformation starts with people. Can you unpack that a little? What does that mean and why is that so important?
Let's think about a scenario. So lots of organisations will have introduced an ERP or they'll have introduced a new finance system, and they go out to tender and they go for a system that's going to give them all the whiz bangs, going to give them everything they need, and then it is rolled out like a software update. So they come out and they roll out a new finance system, and they involve people at the end by going, and now we're going to train you how to use the system. But at no point did anyone go, how are they using the system now? What's the why? Why are we trying to fix this? Now the why might be we need better reporting, we need better systems, we need a better data set. Most people will be fine with that. Most people will go, oh no, I understand that. How can I help that happen? But don't forget, this is how we use this system. This is how we act in reality. If you don't put people first for your digital transformations, what happens is you end up with a really shiny, lovely system with people still using their Excel spreadsheets, still using the systems they used before, still working around things, using 10% of a system that could give them so much more because you haven't sold it, you haven't worked with them, and you haven't thought about the emotional impact of change and the fact that you need to take, it sounds so cliche, but you actually need to take people with you on that journey. There are going to be some changes that are so challenging that the decision is sometimes made in a room that we have to do it this way and this is what happens. And lots of HR people will have dealt with those situations when you've had to perhaps go into a redundancy consultation because you need to make a headcount reduction. That's not transformation, that's change. Transformation is where you are, that might be an element of a transformation. So as part of your overall transformation, you might have to make some organizational changes, some headcount changes. But transformation is that much broader, why are we doing this? What do we do? Digital transformation is a tool. You're changing a tool, you're
Mhm.
changing a system, but you still need people to operate that system. So you have to take your people with you, explain the why again, but also think about that emotional impact. Because if you just change, you just move in the deck chairs. If you change the system, but you don't change the people, you don't take the people with you, you don't think about the culture, you don't work with them on the why, you're just changing the deck chairs.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. It is so true. I looked after HR systems for a while at Tesco implementing stuff, and I realized that my skill was in seeing the problem
Yeah.
and seeing the difference to make and the gap to make. But what my skill wasn't was training people on engaging them into the why and all that stuff. So building that team of, you know, who is your purpose leader? Who's going to go out and get people excited about this? Who is your problem solver? Who's the person that just gets it like that and just goes, I can see what we need to do. Let me run fast on this while you take people with you. But that's tough on a small HR team where you maybe just got one person who's supporting this or a
But the
small
risk
team.
is if you leave digital transformation to your CTO and your D&T guys, they will get you a brilliant system. They'll do a brilliant system rollout, they'll bring it in, but they'll do it from a tech viewpoint, not from
Hmm.
a people viewpoint. And people use tech. So it doesn't matter what systems you've got. It doesn't matter what, if you could have the best system in the world, but if people aren't aligned to that system and using that system, it's just not going to work. You're not going to drive that forward. And you're going to end up iterating or duplicating work, or people who are like, well, there wasn't a problem, why are we fixing it? And you just don't get that, and you might end up with resistance to it rather than engagement with it. And so that's why for me, people are part of that. You will have some digital changes. So let's say you were putting in a on a production line, you were bringing in some automation to that production line. That, you know, obviously that's a digital, that's transformation. You need to think about that, but you still need to think about how the people are then going to interact and what that
Yeah.
looks like. So that's kind of what I mean when I talk about it.
And and in terms of, I mean, we talked there quite a lot about stuff, but I guess it's in terms of thinking about what the common pitfalls that organizations fall into when they focus too much on tech and not enough on people during transformation, and what HR leaders can do to ensure that people are truly at the heart and not just as an afterthought. What would you say to that? What would you how would you like kind of flow through that piece?
So in an ideal world, which, you know, I know not everything is ideal. Sometimes things fall down and you have to react and do things. But in an ideal world, before you go to market to buy your new tech, talk to your people. Just gauge their
Mm,
opinion, ask them, use a survey, use a focus group, have a conversation, be really clear about the problem that you're trying to fix. Now, it might be we've got a legacy technology that's going to fall over. We need to replace that to ensure that we're safeguarded for the future. That most people will go, oh yeah, that's good. I agree with that. Let's do that. But don't do that without talking to them and telling them. Talk to them about their pain points. Talk to them about what this is going to fix for them. Engage with them early and then keep them up to date. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And then when you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more, because it doesn't matter what you do. You and I know someone who I worked with at CIPD, and she's a brilliant communicator. She's expert at internal communication. She's just fantastic. But even with that, we got, well, no one's told us anything. And we would point to website, we'd point to the intranet, we'd point to
hmm.
town halls, we'd point to things up in the building showing what we were doing, we'd point to line manager briefings, we'd point to focus groups, we could point to a whole plethora of things we'd done to communicate, and we would still have people saying, well, no one told me about it, no one talked to me about it. And we were like, but other than ringing everyone up individually and having a cup of tea with them and saying, I just want to bring you up to speed on this, we couldn't find a way through it. There's still going to be problems. So if you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more. So start with that, start with the people, move through that. And then when you're going out, keep them informed. Tell them what you're up to, tell them what's going on, explain, yeah, we'd love to buy this flashy system, but actually we have to cut our cloth accordingly. And we're not a Rolls-Royce company, we're a Fiat Punto company. So we're going to buy a Fiat Punto. Do they still make Fiat Puntos? I don't know. I assume they do.
Possibly.
Yeah,
Possibly.
whatever the EV equivalent is of a Fiat Punto, but that's who we are. And you know, just be honest about what you're doing and what you're doing, because most, again, people are good, and if you tell them what's going on, well, you know this from the work you do. If you talk to people, if you inform
Hmm.
them, they can even deal with the bad stuff because they understand and they know why. So that would be my start. And then just find a way of engaging the people who actually get impacted by it. It's difficult, depending on your organisation. You have some organisations where people want to make every decision by committee. You can't always do that. Sometimes you
Yeah.
need to get the right people in the room, and the people in the room are the right people. But deal with those pain points. Be aware of them. It's that, it's being aware of that emotional attachment that people have and engagement that people have, and trying to work with that. I don't always get it right. So I went into the CIPD probably a little bit too commercial, a little bit too, we need to get this done, we need to change this is what I've been brought in to do, we're going to fix this. And I hadn't fully appreciated the, the CFO calls it a culture of kindness. I hadn't quite appreciated the fact that there was very much a, everyone gets involved, everyone's communicating on everything. And there was a little bit, and that was a little bit of a challenge, because sometimes trying to involve everyone would slow things down sometimes and mean that there was there was an inertia, or there wasn't a change in the pace that we needed to. And I didn't always get it right. I think that I got there eventually. I learned, had good conversations, had some very nice things when I left about you helped this, you did do this, but I didn't always get it right. So that's the other thing. Ask other people, involve other people. Don't HR. We can't be expected to know everything.
No.
We need to use
And
the experts.
and I always think with that digital transformation piece, which is the why as well is being driven by the why for the who, because if this is being driven for a legal compliance reason, but the people who use the system don't really see an issue with what they've currently got, they're not really living in that compliance world. They don't really think about that it's old technology that's getting dated. They're saying it actually does what I need it to do and it does it okay, but it's the why is being driven by something else. You have to take them on that journey, because they are going to suddenly go to a new system that's got different bells and different whistles, different colored buttons, and different ways of working that will be a change to them. And they won't be on board with the why, because the why wasn't for me.
There's
And
this fantastic guy on TikTok. I think he's called Jason the Consultant. I will have a look. Who talks about transformation, and he talks about this fictional character called Janet, who has a drawer full of all the data, and it's just like all this stuff that they're doing around GDPR and all these different things, and then it's just like Janet's got an Excel spreadsheet. The rest of us can't do anything. She locks it. She disappears, and he just talks about transformation, and it's all the things that you go, oh no, yeah, I recognise that
mhm,
that would happen in an organisation. Oh no, that would be, yeah, that could be awful. And it is that if you don't engage those people, and it's going to be, the why is going to be different for different people. But if you're not
yeah,
clear on your organization, and in your people team, if you're not clear about why it is, then how can you expect the rest of the organization to be? So for digital transformation, I think it's one of the easiest things. Most times for digital transformation, the why can be quite easy, and it might be better tech, improved efficiency, legacy replacement. It might be those things, but actually you can get to it quite quickly. But the risk is, if you don't engage your people early and take them with you, you're doing it too, not with. It's old. This isn't new stuff.
yeah, absolutely. And I love that. Understand your organization, your organizational's why, and your organizational's persona, because we live in a world of FOMO, we live in a world of comparison, where we are continually seeing trade magazines, online equivalents of trade magazines, um, you know, whatever, people talking about that we have just spent X million pounds on upgrading X to Y,
Yeah,
the top end solution. We've just gone and bought a Bugatti
yeah,
for our people. And then everyone suddenly is going, our systems are not good enough, our processes are not good enough, because look what they're doing. And it's like, no, they're Google.
yeah.
They're
Oh,
Google. Just,
I went. I went to a conference many years ago, and the brilliant head of talent for Google was talking about recruitment, and she was amazing. She was really interesting. She was amazing. But then she slipped in, well, we get a million unsolicited applications for jobs a year. And I was sat with Katrina Collier, and I was sat next to
right.
Katrina Collier. We looked at each other, we both went, oh my God, I'd be happy with 100. We're not Google. So I was listening. What she was saying was amazing. It was a really interesting story, but there was nothing that I could take at that point to my organization, because I wasn't
Hmm.
getting people that we wanted to come work. I think I was working for a facilities management company at the time. I couldn't get cleaners, let alone 1 million people applying a year because they wanted to be a Googler. It was just, yeah, it's fascinating.
And
Comparison is
and it
interesting.
and it does matter. And asking your people those questions, going out and making sure they're on board, that also allows you to ask that. And if not this, then what?
Yeah,
If not this, then what would be better? And I absolutely love that. I always remember the story of Naomi in my team, who heads up our sales and partnerships, coming out of a meeting with a large organization, 2,000 people, looking to move away from their listening partner. They're really excited about what we do. And she talked them out of spending any more money and talked them out of actually engaging with anybody, and said, the money that you will spend is not best spent on this right now. The
yeah,
problems you've described to me are problems that you don't need another bit of technology for, that you should actually probably use that money to fund getting out to your people, to
yeah,
speaking to them. And that's not what we do. We're not feet on the floor. And she convinced them to not buy our product, and convince them to end the contract with the other company, and convince them to retain the budget but use it in a different way that was more human.
yeah.
And I remember she came out of it and she said, I'm really sorry about this, but, and I'm like, but it is the
Well, but
right
also,
thing to
I
do.
think that's the loyalty thing, though. So now, then, when they get to the point that they go, actually, we're in a different place now. We want to get back to the data. We want to use your tools to help us with that listening. They're going to come back to you. So it's good
100%.
business.
So think about line managers and people leadership. It's something that, I mean, we're going to cover a lot of different things,
Yeah, yeah.
and I love this because it's like there's so much breadth there. Line managers, bridge between the strategy and the day-to-day experience. What do you think makes or breaks their impact? Because I see this all the time now. Everyone is hot on line managers.
There's a couple of things for me. So the first is you've got to trust your people, and you have to trust your line managers, but you can't. It's that old mushroom things. You need to tell them that you need to show them the light, give them the information. You can't force them to share that information the way you want, but you need to give them the tools and give them the ability to do that. So that's the first thing. Make it easy for them. Your line managers they are the engine of your organization, because they're the things that can make or break any change or transformation, but also just day-to-day operations. Your line managers are the ones who, you and I will both over our careers heard things. Well, I know they've said this, but we're going to continue doing this. So if you don't get your line managers on side, you don't support them. So you need to support them. You need to train them. Good old training. Actually, people don't wake up one day and go, "Oh, I'm a brilliant line manager." We learn from other people. We learn from watching other people. We learn from having the tools available to us. Be that through coaching, mentoring, having a culture where you've got someone you can talk to, building a culture of trust, where actually, if I don't know something, there's somebody I can ask, I can work with someone on that, giving them the data and the insight. Did you know that your people are saying these things? Are you aware that this is what's happening? So if you can help your line managers by giving them that information. The challenge I think most organizations and line managers have, I think line managers over the years have been expected to take on more. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that abdicating responsibility for disciplinaries, for recruitment, for those things to a magical personnel team over here is not the best way forward, because you're going to work with these
No,
people, you're going to manage, you're going to support. So I don't think necessarily asking line managers to take on those responsibilities is a bad thing. But what we haven't necessarily done is enabled them to let go of some of the operational stuff. So we're asking them to manage while still doing full-time jobs. As a HR team, as a leader, you have to understand if you're doing that. You might have to do that. That might be what happens in your organization. It might be the size, the scale of your organization. That's the situation you're in. But that's when you have to make it easy for them. So I think line managers are essential in day-to-day operations, let alone change and transformation. But you need to upskill them. You need to support them with that. Help them to. Nobody knows immediately how to have a difficult conversation. Nobody knows immediately how to give hard feedback. Nobody knows the challenge, the difference between brutal honesty and clarity with compassion. They might have some innate skills, but what we can do is help them to have those conversations, to drive that forward, show them what works. Back it up with data and evidence. Let's be evidence-based, show them what works, but give them the tools, give them the time. I think the other thing on that though is you can't sheep dip. because people are different and we all have different life experiences and we all have different things that have brought us to the point that we're at. So if you expect to teach every line manager the same and put them through a sheep dip training program or whatever it is, you're not going to hit everyone.
Hmm.
You might hit some and you will get a good, a large number. But if you do, I don't know, the whatever the company is way, this is how we manage here. Actually, you're not going to hit everyone. So maybe what you need to do is, these are the core skills, these are the core competencies, these are the capabilities, and here's a suite of tools that are going to help you do that. But how does that work for you? And I think it's that understanding. It comes back to people are people, aren't they? We're not widgets, so you can't do the same. I again went off slight tangent. Apologies, all over the place.
It's fine, because it's immediately what I was thinking about there was that, particularly around the sheep dip stuff, was I love the expression freedom in the framework, which is like, you've got to put something in that will fit for everybody, but everyone will use it differently. As
Yeah,
long as you can put a framework of acceptability, behaviors, standards, but within that they can all bounce around in different places within the framework, then people can be individuals and do it in their way, and it'll be different to other people.
yeah, I
But
love that.
I also remember that the first time I ever had a conversation about potentially becoming a line manager, and I was told that I would never be a line manager. I would never be a line manager because I wasn't a productive picker in a warehouse.
Oh,
Because
okay.
yeah, I didn't always achieve, I always did the minimum, but I
Yeah,
didn't always achieve higher performance levels that other people did. And that higher performance level would, flag people up, and they could be a future manager. They perform really well as a picker. And I was like, it was my first ever experience of what makes you good at one thing is
yeah,
conflated with what must make you good at something else. A good
yeah,
picker and a manager of pickers, you must be able to be a good picker. And don't get me wrong, I think the ability to roll your sleeves up and jump in with your people and show them you can shoulder to shoulder work with them, and I'm not talking off the top of my head here, I understand what you do.
yeah.
There's some real value in that, but it was my first ever experience of that, in my first ever proper job. And I was like, it's a rich experience for me, because it just showed me that everyone does come from different routes, and how they've got there may have been hurdles. Some people
And I
may
don't
have
think
been
that's
easy.
changed. I think you still see that in organisations. We talk. You'll hear lots of people talk about technical experts becoming managers, not because they're good at managing people, but because they're good at technical expertise. And I don't think that's necessarily changed in organisations. I was very One of the things that Eversheds, and again Melanie Gallen was very good at, is she created a different partner track. So she had the normal partner track, which was people management, managing clients, and all that sort of stuff. But then she had a technical partner track where she recognized, you are a technical expert, you're going to be brilliant, but you're never going to be someone that can manage clients or manage people. And so they had this different approach, and it was just fantastic because it allowed those people who probably should never be allowed to manage people, but actually were technical expertise, to reach the levels without compromising what they were doing around line management and leadership. Yeah, so I think there are ways of doing it, but we still select people because they have the most billable hours, because they pick the most of certain things, turn up on time. Yeah.
And I mean, it is interesting, because I think then about conversations I've had recently with my own team about, people developing through as we grow. People grow with us as a business. Some people have kind of people are brought in over and above them, because you're where you are. Someone else has come in now. They're going to head up your team to free up this person. And as we adapt and change, all of that life experience has been fantastic. But what we still see is that support that's needed for line managers. And I guess linking that back to transformation now,
Yeah.
what support do line managers need to be effective people leaders? And I think especially during that times of change or transformation.
Yeah, so I think sometimes that's as simple as your communication cascade. So what are you telling people when? How are you making sure that, if you're expecting a line manager to implement or to support and drive something, don't tell them something at the same time as you're telling everyone. Give them a heads up, even if it's only a couple of hours. Let them, that emotional connection with stuff, that understanding. What can you do? Old fashioned cascade of communication. Think about what that looks like. Think about the skills and give them the space to answer the questions. If you've got line managers who people are looking to be the authority, to have the answers, to know what's going on, give them that space to ask those questions. to give them to allow themselves to build that a safe space to be a bit vulnerable. So, because if you want your line managers, and you know, this is a line management responsibility, because we want organizations where you don't want everyone saying following the party line if it's wrong, but you do want people to go, well, actually, no, I know this is why the decision has been made because of X, Y, and Z. So you need to give your line managers space to do that. Give them the tools, again, that toolkit, that support. I like the freedom within a framework. Give them that framework, but then allow them to do it in the way that works for them. But build that trust with them. It takes time, and it takes, yeah, it takes investment in both time and relationships, which I think HR people are really good at. So invest in those relationships, build those relationships, but also sometimes it's okay to go, we're not asking you to do this. We're not putting everything on you, because actually we know this is bad news. And whilst we want to support you to support your people, we're going to take this responsibility. And I think this is where there becomes the line management and the leadership. And whilst a lot of line managers are leaders, your organisational leadership has to step in sometimes and go, yeah, no, this is on us. We're going to do this. We're going to support you. We're going to give you the tools. We're going to work with you, but we're going to do this. Don't leave them out to dry. Don't leave them to get, you know, support them and do what you do. And then I just understand the importance of them. They are this link, as you said earlier. They're that link. They're the ones who are day to day making things happen. They're the ones who are hearing things. They can be amazing for your voice. They can give you great evidence and feedback, tell you what's going on, but only if you build that trust with them and only if you share that information. So yeah, just take the time. And it can be as simple as one of the things that the team introduced at CIPD was just a people manager call once a month. It's a couple of hours once a month where they just talk about being a manager, what they do as a manager, give them some updates, give them the opportunity to ask any questions, answer questions, just provide that forum over and above the normal day-to-day forums where people were in a safe space. They could ask things in a comfortable environment where they didn't feel they were expected to know everything, where they expected to already have all the information and be successful. It's just a simple thing, but it worked really well.
I love that, and it's true as well. And I think that change of any kind, change we hope is often positive, but there's always going to be negative connotations to change as well. And I really do think that when you think about how and who is delivering messages and how and who is delivering change, you also have to think about who is here after the change, who is in what role after the change. Because if that line manager has to do all the bad news, all the hard change, all the tough stuff, and then they have to go and lead that team beyond that change, you better hope that that individual can cope with their people having some kind of potential resentment towards the change to say life was better when,
Yeah.
and associate it with that person. And sometimes a senior leader who's a step away, 2 steps away from the individual, is an easier person to say, well, I made this change.
Yeah,
And your line managers are here to support you and to ensure that they're with you and with you post change too. Like
completely.
give them that. It's not a gift. It's almost essential.
But it's also a responsibility. If you're in a leadership role, you know, you have to stand behind what you said. You need to have that that collective cabinet responsibility. What you might say in a room as a leadership team when that door's closed, that's one thing. But when you go out to the business, if you're not working collaboratively, if you're not working as a collective, if you're saying, oh, well, yeah, but HR said this, or, oh, no, don't listen to her, don't worry about it, it's going to be done this way, that undermines everything. And that's going to permeate throughout your organization. And that's going to affect your line managers. That's going to affect your operation. The other thing is line managers keep the business going. Your customers are still calling. Your services still need to be delivered. Everything's still happening whilst you're going through any change or transformation. Very few organizations go, we're going to stop everything 6 months to go through some change or transformation. Everything still has to happen. And your line managers are the ones that keep that going, keep that motivation, deal with the, oh God, everything's terrible. Oh, I still need to do this marketing brief, or I still need to do this financial report. The line managers are the ones that are keeping that going. They are the heart and the engine of what happens in your organization.
And I can't remember where the conference was, but I can't. And I always get this wrong. I should Google it and find out actually what the facts are, because I always talk about this. It was Baroness somebody talking about either MI6 or MI5,
Okay.
and a conference did the keynote. We're talking about change and transformation, for them as an organization having to put in new systems, new HR systems, and all of this stuff. And they said, when your people are in situations where they are covert or where they are in that stuff, you really can't get your people systems wrong. You really can't suddenly lose a record or, you know, get suddenly lose the contact stuff. You've got to keep that going. And so how do you do that when you have to run, you can't stop the operation, you have to run the operation, so how do you do it? And the answer they had was to duplicate every role. So for every role, there was a second role. So you had the role that delivered the day job, the transactional stuff, and then their counterpart delivering the change into the new world. And as the new world dropped in, that person started picking up that stuff and that person gave it up to that person.
Yeah.
And again, I remember sitting there, it was a Google moment, because I remember sitting there saying, well, what a wonderful way to do that. But when I implemented new HR systems into Tesco, but I still owned pay review and I still owned industrial relations and I
Yeah.
still owned HR systems, nothing seemed to stop.
Yeah.
And when Christmas trading continued for some reason, why?
Goodness me.
You
People want.
know, and when the weather's nice, people want to buy barbecues and
Yeah.
beer and soft drinks and food. Like, you know, you can't stop that, you know. And I was like, how wonderful that must be. But then I was like, can you, exactly what you've just said, I think, which is if you can create the people, the roles, know what they're doing, people understand it, you can almost create this pseudo duplication that says, you are running the business, we are making the change. I'm doing
Yeah.
this part of the change and I'm going to run my team at the same time. I will be more absent, and so therefore you guys will maybe need to shout a little louder when you need something from me.
Yeah, I think there's a real that self-awareness stuff, but I think HR we're not great at that because we do tend to go, yeah, we're going to do all these things and we're going to continue doing. You know, we're going to do a massive TUPE transfer. We're going to deal with the unions on a pay negotiation, whilst also bringing two big organisations together, do an integration of change. And of course, we'll do it in 6 months. Don't worry, that's not a 3-year project. Of course, we'll do it in 6 months. And yeah, no, and you want savings in headcount? Yeah, we'll do that as well. And I think that there is a little bit of everyone wants everything now. Everyone wants everything yesterday, and real transformation and change doesn't happen in 6 months. It takes
No.
it takes time. You might have an act that happens quickly, digital rollout. You might have a new system that goes live, but the real transformation and change sits around that, takes much longer.
And it brings us on to the culture element of this. And I always love what Rob Robson says, which
Yeah,
is that experience is volatile and culture is less volatile. Culture changes by degrees. It changes by 0.1% when you make another change, whereas the experience, the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute is volatile.
yeah,
And if you treat your workforce in the world in that way and you understand that, you design an experience to cope with volatility and your culture is slower and more transformative. But what role does culture play in enabling that successful transformation, and how can HR influence it?
so first things first, culture is not your values or your name on the or the things you've got on the wall. So your culture is not set by one person in a room. So I've seen some debate recently about people and culture, and HR shouldn't be people and culture. Culture is your people. Of course, it should be people and culture. Your culture is set
Yeah,
by your
yeah,
people. It's set by how they turn up every day. It's set by how they feel at work. It's set by how they are communicated with, whether they feel valued, trusted, and that comes from your people practices. So this kind of HR shouldn't be in charge of culture. No, we're not in charge of culture, but we are massively influential in how that culture is experienced by your employees. So you think about your people experience, that's culture. And then you're going to have a load of subcultures. You're going to have loads of line managers who've set up their own little cultures in different areas. You then have leaders who espouse culture and then don't live that. They don't show that. So they say one thing and then they don't do it. They do it in a different way. So they say we trust experts and then they don't trust their own experts in the organization. They say we believe in collaboration, but we're going to do this in this room and then tell you afterwards. And that's where culture is good. The real culture
hmm
is, yeah, but everything has to go to that team to be decided. Yeah, they say they trust us, but everything has to go there to be decided. Or well, you know, they say they're working collaboratively, but we know they're briefing against each other. Or, well, yeah, but we know this is happening, and I know that I sit in this place, but my team love me, and I'm going to do it this way anyway because I don't follow what's ever happening. So your culture piece is really interesting, and you need to understand that. So it's interesting. I think culture does change by degree, but I think you can have an organization with a overall cultural, maybe North Star, but within that you've got a number of subcultures that can both work with and against that. And I think as leaders and as people, you need to really be cognizant and understand that to support any transformation. Culture's role in change and transformation can be massive. One of my favorite things is, we're going to do a cultural transformation. Oh, we're going to do a cultural transformation. Awesome. What does that mean? Oh, well, they don't actually mean a cultural transformation. What they mean is, we'd like people to think more about KPIs. We'd like people to be more performance focused. We'd like people to understand more about what our customers are saying and what that looks like. That's not a cultural transformation. You might get degrees of cultural change as a result of that, but actually that's an organizational transformation. So let's think about what it is. And I think culture becomes a bit of a catch-all, doesn't it? Because our culture is.
It does.
But yeah, it's
I think I'm a little obsessed at the moment about, you know, again, growing up in a world where you saw, and you know, 5 senses in the workplace, and you went and you sat, and even if you didn't participate in certain things, you saw another team. There's been open plan offices for a long time. You saw a team, you saw that leader leading, a leader not so great at leading, you saw people jumping into offices, jumping out of offices, shooting off for coffees, panic faces. You saw all of that stuff. You saw when somebody was looking stressed. And then we moved to that remote workspace, which gave us so many opportunities to be brilliant and opportunities to recruit different people and give different experiences. But the one thing we've done is we've reduced the senses. And I don't see. So when I don't see, what I do is I fill the gaps myself. I fill the gaps with my mindset. If my mindset is a positive one, or broadly not, you know, that side of the middle, and I go, I'm sure that everyone is collaborating. I'm sure that the people who need to know do know, and I'm sure that stuff like that. And that will be my positive mindset. If my mindset is that side of the center, I will fill the gaps with negativity, like nobody is collaborating. How could anyone possibly do this when I don't know what's going on? Nobody knows what's going on in this organization. The I becomes the us quite quickly in my mind. And I think there's a challenge that hasn't resolved itself. That is, how do you define and build a culture where you have disparate and local working and all of that stuff going on, and deliver change and transformation.
And it also, you know, there's been a lot of organizations have had some high turnover post-COVID and in the last couple of years, because the market was such, lots of people moved. And so people have come into an organization who weren't there pre-COVID. So whatever the culture was, if you want to call it culture, or the way, you know, the way we do things around here, that's very different for a lot of those people. And you hear people, oh, well, you know, we're not all these new starters are coming and we're not embedding the culture in them. Well, what do you mean by that? Because actually that shouldn't need everyone to be together to do that. You should be able to do that through your purpose, your values, what you're doing, how you show up, how you communicate, how you promote people, how you give people opportunities. That's all part of what your culture is and how you work, what your customers are saying about you, what your employees, your ex-employees, what your board, what your volunteers, all the different things. How does that show up? What does that look like? But I think we confuse I think culture becomes a bit of a catch-all in that, doesn't it? So it becomes a little bit of what we want from our employee value proposition. What do we want from people? What do we want people to show up? But then also, how is it done? And which is the culture? It's the culture, because the culture is really what happens here. What's acceptable? What do we work for? What's our purpose? What do we allow to happen around us? What do people go, oh yeah, well, you know, yeah, we know they're not really a great line manager, but they're just like that. We let that happen.
Yeah,
You know,
they're
it's the brilliant
they're
idiot
high
thing,
performing
isn't it?
and toxic. So
Yeah, which is, you know, that brilliant idiot, this is impossible because they might be brilliant, but they're still an idiot.
I love that. And do you know what? I mean, I really remember working at Carlsberg, and it was probably one of the first organizations I really did go to where the how and the what grid, that classic
Yeah,
9 box grid of how you deliver your job is as important as what you deliver. So you deliver your KPIs, but are you delivering it with our values, our vision, the behaviors in mind? So actually, if you're delivering your job, but your how is terrible, you are underperforming. And that will
yeah,
reflect in pay
completely.
rises, in pay reviews, and culture. I'm going to we're going to run out of time. We're going to run out of
Yeah,
time.
of
So
course.
I have some closing reflections. Two
Okay.
questions that I ask everybody. So thinking about employee voice, because obviously we're an employee voice and listening company. How do organizations ensure that people feel heard and involved during that transformation?
Okay. Again, I haven't always got this right because sometimes you get busy and things take over. But ask the questions, listen, tell them if you can't. So often what will happen is you'll go out and you'll say we need to make these changes and this is what we need to do, and people will come back with suggestions, they'll come back with ideas, and they just don't work. Don't ignore them. Tell them why. Explain to people. Share that information. Communicate, and then communicate some more. Even if that communication is bad news, just make sure it's clear. Remove that ambiguity and remove the feeling. You know, share that information as much as you can. So I think that's the most important thing about employee voice. Listen. Employee voice isn't just a survey, it's about what you do with that. So you can have, if you have all this great data, you know, and then it sits in a room and you don't do anything with it, then that's just numbers. Data without analytics, just numbers. Use it. Use the
Hmm.
insights. Enable your line managers to use the insights. Give them tools that they can actually use themselves, and then help them understand why it's important. Because otherwise, you just go, "Well, I've got a survey. This is what it says. Yeah, great." Not helpful.
Brilliant.
Not useful.
And if there was one thing that you think people can take away from today, what's the one thing you'd say? Take this away and do this tomorrow.
If you work in HR and you haven't read your annual report for your organisation from cover to cover, then you are missing a trick. Know your organisation, know how it works, understand your customers, understand what people do in their jobs, because then you can truly align your people practices with what your business needs. So if you don't know where to start and you've got an annual report, read it from cover to cover, including all the boring stuff about finances and pensions. Read it from cover to cover, and that'll put you in a
That
really good place to understand your
that
business.
is a great place. I read whenever I go to meet a client, if I go to meet a potential client, the one thing I always do is read their annual report. I love that so much. So
Yeah,
thank
totally.
you so much for joining me today, Amanda. It has been a joy. I think we could have done a 3 episode version of today, but I think we're going to come back. I think we're going to have to come back and maybe do some kind of free forming on this. So thank you so much for
Well, I'm
today.
hoping you will return the favour on my own podcast, which is linked to my doctoral studies. So I'm doing a doctorate
Absolutely.
in business administration focused on change and transformation, and I have a podcast called Transforming Work. And I'm looking for real stories around how transformation works, learning from each other, which will inform my doctorate. So I'm hoping you'll repay me the favour. But thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our
Definitely
conversation.
will. Thank you.